Welcome to the age of disruption, a time when the foundations of global order are breaking apart and the illusions of stability are fading. It is the year 2025, and the world is burning, not only in fire, but in meaning. We are witnessing the twilight of a system that held for decades, forged in the aftermath of the Second World War, led by the West, and reinforced by a shared belief in global cooperation, free markets, and military deterrence. That order is collapsing, and behind its disintegration lies a chain reaction, triggered by power shifts, technological disruption, imperial ambition, and above all, the unstoppable rise of China. What we're experiencing isn't a coincidence. It is the product of strategy, long-term, methodical, and deeply calculated. China's transformation from regional power to global superpower is one of the most decisive factors reshaping our time. Through relentless industrial growth, systemic political control, and strategic integration into the global economy, the People's Republic has positioned itself as both a benefactor and a challenger of the very system it once relied upon. The turning point came in 2012, with Xi Jinping assuming leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. From that moment, China embraced a doctrine of national rejuvenation, centered around three goals: modernizing and expanding its military capacity, achieving dominance in critical technologies, and reshaping the international order to serve Chinese interests. China stopped playing by the rules and started rewriting them. It no longer hides its ambition to lead. Beijing now speaks openly of a multipolar world where the United States is no longer the ultimate authority. In 2018, the United States began its counteroffensive. It started with tariffs and trade wars, but quickly evolved into a deeper rivalry over digital supremacy, semiconductor control, satellite networks, and global influence. New strategic alliances were built. Old ones were tested. Taiwan became a flashpoint, not just in a regional conflict, but in the ideological contest between democratic governance and authoritarian control. What followed was an era of relentless confrontation, economic, diplomatic, and technological. Yet this rivalry is not merely bilateral, it is a systemic shift where every nation must reconsider its alignment in a world that no longer has a single center of gravity. At the same time, another force emerged from the shadows of the past: Russia. Under Vladimir Putin, Moscow has pursued a project not of restoration, but of redefinition. Not merely recovering lost influence, but actively rewriting borders and challenging the very idea of Western legitimacy. The invasion of Ukraine in 2022 was not a reaction, it was a mission, a geopolitical campaign designed to fracture NATO, break European unity, and assert that Russia still matters, not just regionally, but globally. Despite international condemnation and sweeping sanctions, Russia has adapted, its economy reorganized around war, its institutions hardened, and its society reconditioned for confrontation. For the Kremlin, war is no longer an exception. It is policy. While China builds influence through infrastructure, technology, and economic dependency, Russia wields brute force, Yet both powers are connected by a common goal: undermining the post-war global system and displacing the dominance of the West. Their actions, although different in style, lead to the same result: destabilization. At the same time, the United States, though still powerful, finds itself overstretched. It is facing a multipolar challenge with a strategy designed for a unipolar world. Its influence remains vast, but its willingness to carry global responsibility is visibly declining. The cracks are widening, the alliances are weakening, and the balance, once upheld by deterrence and diplomacy, is now drifting toward confrontation. In today's international landscape, morality has become an accessory, invoked when convenient, ignored when inconvenient. Ethics, historical accountability, and shared values have been replaced by one simple rule: strategic self-interest. Global diplomacy no longer operates on memory or principle. It runs on transaction, expedience, and the pursuit of power. Yesterday's enemies become partners. Yesterday's allies turn into competitors. What matters is leverage. From Churchill's alliance with Stalin to Nixon's pivot to Mao, history is filled with examples where moral compromise became a geopolitical necessity. But there is a difference between recognizing moral complexity and completely abandoning it. Few relationships illustrate this tension better than that between Poland and Ukraine. Between 1943 and 1944, the Ukrainian insurgent army orchestrated a brutal ethnic purge of Polish civilians in Volhynia and eastern Galicia. An estimated 100,000 people were murdered. The legacy of that trauma remains unresolved. Despite this history, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Poland became one of Ukraine's strongest supporters, pushing for its independence, advocating for its integration with NATO and the EU, and investing in shared security. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Poland responded faster than almost any other country. 1.6 million refugees were taken in without conditions. Massive weapon shipments flowed eastward. Medical care, housing, and education were provided on a national scale. Transit routes for Western aid were coordinated and secured. And yet, public acknowledgement from Ukraine was, at times, absent, even dismissive. Grievances emerged over delivery times, grain exports, and symbolic disputes. Meanwhile, gestures of gratitude often shifted toward the US, Germany, or the UK, sidelining Warsaw's contributions. For many in Poland, this revealed a painful truth. Gratitude has no place in geopolitics. Only interests remain. In the 20th century, wars were fought over oil. In the 21st, they may be fought over something smaller, but no less vital: rare earth elements. These 17 minerals, including neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, are the foundation of nearly every military and high-tech system in existence. From hypersonic missiles to electric vehicles, satellites, and drones. China currently controls about 85% of global production and processing. That's not just economic leverage, it's strategic dominance. The US and its allies are scrambling to build independent supply chains. But rare earths aren't just about mining. They require refining, infrastructure, and political control over the territories where they exist. This silent arms race is playing out across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, regions rich in resources but often fragile and politically unstable. What begins as trade may end in war, and the winner of the rare earth battle may well dictate the future of global power. The world is littered with hot zones, flashpoints that could erupt at any moment, dragging great powers into regional conflicts that escalate beyond their borders. Let's name just a few. Middle East. Tensions soar after Iran threatens retaliation for a consulate attack. At the same time, Israel continues a long-term offensive against Hamas, following a brutal terrorist attack. Civilian casualties mount. The U.S. backs Israel, but faces growing pressure to rein in the destruction. North Korea, South Korea, missile launches, threats of preemptive war, and the growing possibility of a nuclear confrontation involving Japan and the United States. Syria, a broken state with active involvement from Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the U.S. The chance of a direct clash between global forces remains dangerously high. Sudan. A vicious civil war displaces millions and threatens to spill into neighboring countries like Ethiopia, Egypt, and Chad. Pakistan. Political chaos, Taliban incursions along the border, and nuclear tensions with India. A single spark could trigger regional disaster. Venezuela. Economic collapse, civil unrest, and the risk of external intervention. Mass migration strains the region. Ukraine, Russia. The war continues. Russia escalates. Ukraine strains under the weight of prolonged conflict. NATO's unity is tested, and in some capitals, the political will to continue is fading. China, Taiwan. Simulation drills, naval blockades, air incursions. Beijing is rehearsing real conflict, and the West is watching, wondering, when will the simulation become real? Let us entertain a possibility that few take seriously, yet few can rule out. What if Greenland, rich in strategic minerals and Arctic access, becomes a target for quiet military takeover? Not by tanks or bombs, but by covert forces, private contractors, or political manipulation under the veil of global chaos. It sounds far-fetched, until we remember how many invasions in history began with securing stability. In an era where distraction is global and attention spans short, the world might look the other way, and by the time it notices, it may be too late. The United Nations was created to prevent the horrors of World War from ever repeating. It was meant to uphold peace, human rights, and global cooperation. Today, it has become a spectator to suffering. The Security Council, its most powerful body, is structurally paralyzed. The veto power granted to the US, Russia, China, the UK, and France has become a tool of inaction. Resolutions on Syria, Gaza, Ukraine, or Taiwan are blocked as each superpower protects its interests. Thousands die, cities burn, hospitals collapse, and in response, statements of concern, condemnations, appeals, no action. To civilians in war zones, the UN is no longer a protector. It is an observer with no teeth, a bystander issuing press releases. It's not that the UN doesn't care, it's that it no longer can act. The West still holds immense wealth, influence, and military capability, but its cohesion is fading. For decades, Western stability rested on two pillars: unquestioned U.S. leadership, transatlantic solidarity. Today, both are in crisis. Donald Trump's political resurgence has shaken global confidence in the U.S. as a dependable ally. His dismissive attitude toward NATO, open praise for autocrats, and suggestions of abandoning allies have introduced uncertainty where once there was unity. Meanwhile, Europe, fragmented, bureaucratic, and slow to react, has failed to step into a leadership role. The EU lacks a common defense policy, rapid response capacity, and above all, strategic courage. But the most alarming signal is this: America is leaving Europe, not with fanfare, not with headlines, but step by step, base by base, budget by budget. In early 2025, credible reports began to emerge suggesting a significant shift in U.S. defense policy under the Trump administration. According to leaked internal documents from the Pentagon and reports published by the Washington Post and GB News, the United States is reconsidering its traditional military commitments to Europe. The leaked documents indicate that, in the event of a conventional military attack by Russia on Europe, the United States does not intend to respond militarily unless the attack involves nuclear weapons. This marks a dramatic departure from long-standing NATO principles, under which an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. U.S. forces in Germany are being reduced. Command centers are quietly shifting focus to the Pacific. Military rotations in Poland and the Baltics are shortened. Financial resources are being redirected to counter China. These aren't tactical decisions. They're strategic withdrawals. It's the beginning of a geopolitical rebalancing, one that leaves Europe exposed. And for the first time in decades, leaders across the continent are forced to ask, what if NATO doesn't come? What if the alliance is just a name, not a commitment? The old security guarantees are fading. The shield that once protected Europe is moving elsewhere, and the silence that follows is deafening. And while the world focuses on visible threats, another war is already underway. A modern, decentralized conflict with no front lines and no uniforms. A hybrid war. We see it in acts of sabotage, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, covert disruptions of pipelines, railway systems, and energy grids. In the Persian Gulf, anonymous mines cripple ships. In Europe, train networks mysteriously fail. In the Pacific, satellites flicker and data vanishes, all without clear attribution. Trade routes are no longer secure. Data flows are no longer safe. Peace as we knew it is no longer real. It's an illusion of routine. Beneath all of this runs a deeper offensive, psychological. The enemy is no longer just at the gates. It's in the algorithms, propaganda, dehumanization, disinformation campaigns designed to polarize societies and blur the lines between truth and fiction. This is war without uniforms, waged on timelines and screens. Its goal is simple: make people numb. So when the real war comes, it will feel familiar. Across the globe, states are rearming, not to attack, but because not preparing now would be suicide. Poland plans to raise its army to 300,000 soldiers. Finland and Sweden abandon neutrality and join NATO. Japan invests in preemptive strike capabilities. South Korea modernizes its nuclear deterrence. Germany initiates the largest Bundeswehr reforms since the Cold War, with hundreds of billions in defense spending. No one wants war, but everyone is preparing for it. And history has taught us, when everyone prepares for war, war becomes inevitable. The world is inching toward a state that can only be described as pre-war. It's not open conflict, not yet, but the signs are unmistakable. Military preparation, psychological conditioning, diplomatic fracture. The pieces are moving, and no one seems to know or admit how close we are. The next war will not begin with a single explosion. It will begin in silence. It will spread like fog, slow, silent, and everywhere at once. We already see it. Russia conducting joint exercises with Belarus at NATO's doorstep. North Korea launching missiles near the south, triggering global alerts. The US conducting nuclear war simulations as if expecting the unthinkable. Donald Trump intensified his strategy of economic nationalism, focusing on reducing the United States' dependence on China. He introduced high tariffs, reaching up to 145% on Chinese goods, aiming to protect American industry and reduce the trade deficit. His policy toward China was seen as an attempt to curb Beijing's growing influence. However, the lack of coordination with U.S. allies and the unpredictability of Trump's administration led to international isolation and a decline in trust toward American leadership. As a result, Trump's actions triggered global tensions, disrupted supply chains, and contributed to increased economic uncertainty worldwide. China surrounding Taiwan in simulated blockades and naval drills. In response to the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, China introduced a series of retaliatory duties on U.S. goods, targeting agricultural, industrial, and technological products. This marked the first stage of escalation, affecting not only both economies, but also global commodity and logistics markets. Beijing's most strategic move was to restrict the export of rare earth elements, critical components in modern electronics, defense industries, renewable energy technologies, and electric vehicles. As the world's leading producer and processor of these minerals, China leveraged its dominance as a tool of political and economic pressure. This shift elevated the trade war to a new geostrategic level, demonstrating how economic conflict can evolve into a struggle for technological supremacy and control over the critical resources of the future. Simultaneously, we are witnessing a subtle but unmistakable alignment. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, four regimes operating independently, yet increasingly coordinated. They hold joint military drills. They support each other diplomatically and technologically. They trade in weapons, microchips, cyber expertise, and most importantly, they share a common goal: to break Western dominance. This is not a formal alliance, it's a convergence of logic, a shared instinct for opportunity. It is the rise of a new coalition built not on treaties but on mutual defiance. The world today is a crowded stage of colliding interests. Too many actors, too many unresolved traumas, too little time. Russia will not stop at Ukraine, because for the Kremlin, this is no longer a matter of politics, it's identity. The war is not a response, it is a project. A mission to resurrect a sphere of influence lost after 1991, from Kyiv to the Balkans, from the Caucasus to the Baltics. And while the world focuses on Ukraine, Russia is transforming. The economy is wartime adapted. Society is disciplined and conditioned. Education is realigned with military doctrine. The state has become a war machine, and it will not stop on its own. Mobilization systems are expanding. Weapons production is accelerating. Troops are stationed across NATO's borders. And the message is clear. This is preparation, not defense. Because Russia no longer sees NATO as an unbreakable wall. It sees a fractured alliance, weakened by politics, divided by fear. It sees an America that is withdrawing, a Europe that is hesitating, and neighbors that are alone, not by design, but by default. Meanwhile, in Beijing, time is running against a single man, Xi Jinping. As his term nears its end, the promises of Chinese supremacy remain unfulfilled. Instead of dominance, China faces economic stagnation, youth unemployment, crumbling public trust, escalating tensions with the West. And in a system where failure is not tolerated, autocratic leadership seeks the oldest form of legitimacy, external conflict. Xi Jinping needs a symbolic victory, something to silence critics, something to reignite the myth of the Chinese dream. And there is one obvious candidate, Taiwan. The narrative of historical reunification is no longer theoretical. With internal pressure rising, it's becoming operational. Not for glory, but for survival. China is rehearsing naval blockades, cyber attacks, the seizure of outer islands. And it is only a matter of time before a pretext emerges, or is manufactured. Taiwan is no longer a red line, it's a countdown. And yet, most of us don't see it. We live distracted, numb by comfort, fed by endless consumption, blinded by social media. We've mistaken temporary stability for permanent peace, and now we struggle to imagine that anything could truly disrupt our daily lives, but it can, and it will. We ignore headlines that matter. We dismiss early warnings. We outsource our fear to others until it's at our doorstep. And when it arrives, we will realize that it didn't come suddenly. It came quietly while we were scrolling, shopping, laughing. What we're witnessing is not a phase, not a crisis, not a political cycle. It is the end of an era. For decades, the world was shaped and safeguarded by the order created by the United States. That order is now collapsing. And the irony, it is not being dismantled by America's enemies, but by America itself. Fragmented, self-absorbed, exhausted by its own responsibilities. In the vacuum left behind, a new global struggle has begun. Not for peace, but for authorship. Who will write the new rules? Because the next world order will not be negotiated. It will be forged. Through fire, through steel, through the silence after the last shot is fired. Every stable system we now admire was once born from conflict, and this time will be no different. The future will not be planned. It will be decided. Thank you for watching this film. If this message resonated with you, consider sharing it. Leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel. Stay aware. Stay engaged.